Hey, Uncle Mark.
Yes, here I am.
You've run away. You've left our country.
I have, but at some point I'm going to return.
No, you're unwelcome now.
Okay, fair enough.
You left, and you were naughty.
Yes,
and you left here.
Yeah.
Against my will.
Yes,
and frankly, I'm not sure I want you back.
Well,
I don't know. Uncle Doug, is there any precedent that we can turn to?
We need the wisdom of Solomon.
Yeah, I'm afraid if that's your attitude, Uncle Dan, then today's story is not for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm open to changing my mind.
Okay. Yeah, let me try and change it to the worse.
Okay.
It's time again for another edition of Terrible Parables.
Yay.
In today's discussion, we'll be talking about a parable that is near and dear to my heart, but not in a good way. Far more like the shrapnel around Tony Stark's heart. As I'm sure it was for you two uncles, my religious experience was terribly general and generally terrible. But this specific parable was very specifically damaging to me. As we'll discuss, because of my unique circumstances growing up, it was as though some ancient Hebrew possessed both a crystal ball and a real disdain for yours truly. So today we'll be discussing the parable of the Prodigal Son.
Apparently, I'm very tickled by the notion of an ancient Hebrew hating on Doug.
We'll be talking about the Prodigal Son today, so it's also known as the parable of the two sons, the lost son, the loving father, or the lovesick father. Prodigal, by the way, is a word meaning wastefully extravagant, and it is not mentioned in this parable. So,
is that true? I didn't know that was the... Are you serious? That's the meaning of the word?
Yeah, prodigal.
And it's been imposed upon the parable.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from any of the translations thereof.
No, it's absolutely not. So this parable only appears in the book of Luke, so it adheres at least partly to Uncle Doug's first rule of the Bible. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. So there'll be none of the cross-gospel bargain shopping our listeners have come to know and love. So let's start off just by reading the parable. It's not terribly long, and then we'll talk about what the moral problems are. And then we'll talk about why it sucked so much for me.
Okay.
So, starting in Luke chapter 15, verse 11, and we're going to be in the New International Version to speed things along a bit. It says, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth with wild living." In the King James Version, it says riotous living.
I feel targeted. Okay.
Wait, what did it say in King James?
Riotous living.
Oh, riotous living. Yeah. That sounds great.
I know. That's the story I want to hear.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah,
I feel like this so far. This story has happened to about 1 in every 3 fathers in Los Angeles. The Fire Festival, that's riotous living that we were talking about.
After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed for his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to the father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven. I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." We're almost there. "Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called to one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him.' And this is the last verse of the story. 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" There you go.
There you go.
Parable of the Prodigal Son. Now, I'm sure most of our listeners...
We should probably stop there. I think that's a good place to stop. Yeah.
My takeaway from that is, when it comes to sons, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it.
I smelled trouble coming, so I think this is a good place to stop.
Right. So yeah, and well, you should. Many of our listeners who spent any time in a Christian upbringing will remember that parable and quite possibly have some fond memories of it. I certainly remember it being treated as one of the very best of the parables. I do think that's partly because Jesus was a shitty storyteller. And this parable, leaving aside any moral issues, has at least an easy narrative arc to follow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, unlike many of the other parables, which are chock full of metaphors and references to Palestine 2,000 years ago, this one you can kind of get to.
Well, yeah, there's a lot less in this one. Like, I feel like I kind of get what he was getting at just on a first blush.
So let's start with the problematic nature of this parable before we get to the personal. Firstly, the younger brother asks for his entire inheritance, and his father just gives it to him. Is that how inheritance works?
Hey, you know what? That's how, if you got a cool dad, sometimes he'll just do that shit.
So he heads off
That's
to the
how
big
it
city.
worked with Fred and Donald Trump, right? He just here's
Right,
$419 million, dummy. Don't blow it all in one place. Whoops, he blew it all in one place.
So this brother heads off to the big city for some riotous living, where he blows... and then he blows all his money on hookers and what must be high-grade Judean frankincense. And then he falls in hard times.
Sex workers, yeah.
Right.
Hookers is an ugly Civil War term. We're not going to use that anymore.
Right on.
Yeah.
While working a menial job, he realizes that his father's servants, who knows if they're slaves or not, we don't get that, but we'll leave that aside, they're all doing better than him. So at least according to the straight reading of the narrative, he figures out a way to go back and manipulate his way back into his father's house. It doesn't seem like a true turning of the heart or a story of redemption, right?
I don't know. He goes back. He's going to go back, and he says to his dad, or at least his plan is to say to his dad, at least just let me work the fields.
Right.
Which to me that says he's not. That doesn't reek of manipulation to me.
It smells a little bit like Saul Goodman to me, but fine.
Okay. Okay. I hear you.
Yeah. So he goes back to his father, who welcomes him back instantly, puts on a huge celebration. There's no like accounting. There's no like, you know what I mean? Like he just comes back and there's a party. You're back. No worries. It's fine. Anyway.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the part of the story that really puts the knives to me. So
see you guys. I have a thing.
I know.
I have some riotous living to get to.
Stay with us.
His older brother is frustrated with his father because he stayed, he tended his fields, he kept the household afloat. Yet when his brother who had left, and by every conceivable metric, had a better time, returns with nothing but a hangover, his father throws him a fucking party. As we've mentioned on this podcast before, Uncle Mark and I grew up in an environment that, let's just say, was a little bit less than loving. But even in that environment, perhaps especially in that environment, our parents would dole out the occasional kindnesses. And I think we all believed that those were finite and zero-sum. So there was a very sick competition between us brothers for the affection of our captors.
Yeah.
Anyway, Uncle Mark, much earlier than I did, decided that this whole Mormon thing was not for him. And against tremendous resistance and near constant fighting, he stopped going to church, what, Mark, 14?
I started trying at 12, and the beatings persisted until about 16, where I think they were just too tired.
They spun out like a hurricane.
Yeah.
So I saw this as an opportunity to garner what passed for our parents' love. So I went hard for Mormonism. I tried to tick off all the boxes: seminary council, BYU. I went on a mission, but this did not work. And unbelievably, Mark's stubborn refusal to go to church was met by my dad with a kind of respect. Well, my zealotry was met with nothing but disdain.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Because
it's true.
fuck you.
I know, right? Yeah, and so this parable, with the birth order of the brothers reversed, basically sanctified that dysfunction. And given the environment, I couldn't say a word about it to anybody.
Wow.
Every time this parable was told, it stuck a knife in my heart because it just said, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, why are you bothering to try? Like, it was terrible. And I couldn't talk to anybody about it because in that environment, you could not admit that you were having a problem with the morality of a parable, particularly this one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's definitely true that there were two brothers before me. So Doug's the youngest of four idiot boys, and every one of us kind of blew a hole in the completely artificial worldview my parents had constructed. And I think by the time Doug came along, he looked at 3 jagged paths before him and said, nope, I'm going to do my own. And that is, I'm going to do everything you want. According to the Book of Mormon, as you said, Doug, seminary president, straight A student, dated a string of completely vapid blonde Mormon girls. That was just everything that BYU, everything they should have wanted. And they repaid all that with a level of disdain that was shocking even in our family.
It was comical at the time.
It kind of was.
It was
kind
so
of
insane.
was.
Yeah.
We would laugh about it. Like, only one of the other brothers went on a mission, and he got sent home early because he's a fucking psychopath. And so when Doug went to go, Doug put in his papers, went to go to Honduras, which was not the, happiest place for a dumb
And then,
kid
exactly.
for you to go. And
His
they almost
heavenly
didn't.
father shit on him.
Right.
Yeah,
in
totally.
in terms of where he had to go on his mission.
Yeah.
Love to our Honduran friends for sure, but it's a tough place for a naive white kid from Salt Lake to go, and they almost didn't go to his farewell.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Really?
It was crazy. And
you guys won the parental lottery. I don't know how you guys did
nailed it.
But you guys were valiant in the pre-existence, I gotta say.
But what was so fucked up?
Well, we're
is,
not black. There's that.
And I want to caveat this. Mark didn't have it easy by any stretch, any easier than any of the rest of us. There was just a particular kind of spin on the way they looked at me.
Yeah.
But every family has dysfunction, and everyone has terrible memories. But one of those dysfunctions that was so personal to me in a desperate attempt to get my parents' love was literally sanctified by this story. And every time I heard it, it broke me.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe it's not such a good idea to use 2,000-year-old morally problematic fables to pump into your kids' heads.
Yeah, I don't know. Here's what I will say. As someone who, in my family, I was estranged from a family member that I loved dearly for many years, and then she decided to rejoin the family, and that was very difficult and very and problematic in a lot of ways. But in the end, I took the part of the father in this parable and just said, fuck it. I'd rather have this person whom I love in my life than the pride that I had to give up, in taking her back. And then all of the, she caused a tidal wave of pain in our family. And we all had to sort of swallow a lot. Yeah. But it was worth it to us because we wanted her back in our lives.
Yeah.
Well, I think that if it's the story between the prodigal son and the father,
right?
There is, and I have I have a very problematic relationship with the term and the concept of forgiveness, but there is something nice there. It's like, look, I love you no matter what, and you're welcome back. The reason it's a problem is the other son.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
They could just take that out of the story, and it would be a far better story.
Or it would be sweet.
Or just better explain why this is okay. Or why, better explain the relationship of the father and the non-prodigal son.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a story of forgiveness, and I can get behind that to a certain degree. But it also has like the last little moral is like, don't really bother sticking to it.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the end, I'm going to take you.
A lot of these stories, these Bible stories, have what the writers or whoever codified all this garbage into a single book have these kind of M. Night Shyamalan twists that they think are super dope, but they just invert the morality.
Right.
Right? So if it was just a story of a father and a son, it would be a story about unconditional love. Right? It would be, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, yes, you betrayed everything we believe and stand for, but you're back and I'll forgive it and let's try again.
Yeah.
Right? But it has to grind the face of the other son in the dirt.
Right.
And say, doing everything right gets you nothing. It's like like Job, right? Doing everything, fuck you.
Totally.
Doing everything right gets you nothing. That's the moral.
It accidentally throws in a whole nihilistic side of it that literally torpedoes the whole thing and points you in the direction of like, well, none of this actually matters. It's all just subjective and whatever. So,
and I think a lot of I remember that I saw like seminary teachers and teachers in church kind of struggle to explain that last bit of the story.
Yeah.
Because I think they all know that there's something wrong with that, or at least not really as beautiful and sublime as they're trying to make it out to be. So
Yeah. So
Yeah,
somebody always has to get fucking hurt. That's if the Bible made no claims about the afterlife or God or anything, you could look at it as just a tome of existential tales.
right.
You know, everybody dies, everything sucks, there's no justice. The Bible.
It's almost as if there's like these nice little fables, and then some like depressed Russian got his hands on it, and you know,
Dostoevsky put the final word.
right, yeah, and just was like, no, this isn't any good. You know what I need to do? I need to make this terrible in some way.
Well, I think they succeeded.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that.
Okay, Doug, I'm sorry. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
Forgive me. I'll throw a party for you. And Dan, fuck you.
And new Patreon goal is therapy for both of these other uncles.
All the uncles in therapy.
All the uncles in therapy. Let's work on that. And with that, we'll move on.
Let's move on.